In a world where most developing nations are drowning in debt, begging international lenders for permission to build roads, schools, and housing, one African leader is attempting something that many experts once called impossible. What if a country could modernize its cities without borrowing billions from the West? What if the same streets that once symbolized poverty, overcrowding, and colonial neglect could be transformed into organized, modern urban ecosystems built entirely through national sovereignty and local labor? Right now, in Burkina Faso, Captain Ibrahim Traoré is pushing one of the boldest urban transformation agendas Africa has seen in decades. But this is not just about constructing buildings. It is about dismantling an entire system that many Africans believe was designed during colonial rule to keep cities divided, dependent, and economically fragile. Instead of relying on foreign architects, international banks, and Western urban planning models, Burkina Faso is trying to build something radically different. A city designed for national dignity rather than foreign profit. Across the streets of Ouagadougou and beyond, discussions are growing louder about land reform, housing sovereignty, and the future of African cities. Supporters believe Traoré is creating a blueprint that could inspire the entire continent. Critics warn that the ambitions may be too large for one country to sustain. But regardless of where people stand, one thing is undeniable. The world is watching Burkina Faso very closely. And the most shocking part is this. The country attempting this transformation is not one of Africa's richest nations. Burkina Faso has faced terrorism, economic pressure, political instability, and years of international dependency. Yet despite all these challenges, Traoré's government is speaking about modern housing revolutions, organized urban zones, and self-funded infrastructure as if the country has decided to reject the old rules completely. So how exactly does this housing revolution work? Why is the government targeting colonial-era city layouts? Can a nation truly modernize its cities without surrendering itself to foreign debt? And could this experiment completely reshape the future of urban Africa? Stay with me until the very end, because the deeper you look into Burkina Faso's new housing revolution, the more it begins to challenge everything the world has been told about development, sovereignty, and modern cities. To understand why this project matters so much, you first have to understand the problem Traoré claims he inherited. Many African cities were never originally designed to improve the lives of African populations. During colonial rule, urban planning often focused on extraction rather than prosperity. Roads connected mines to ports. Administrative districts were separated from local communities. European neighborhoods received infrastructure while African communities expanded in overcrowded conditions with limited services. Even after independence, many countries continued operating within the same urban systems. Populations grew rapidly, but infrastructure development failed to keep pace. Informal settlements expanded around major cities. Housing shortages intensified. Slums became permanent realities rather than temporary conditions. For decades, governments across Africa turned toward international lenders for help. Loans were taken. Projects were announced. Some infrastructure improved. But many nations also accumulated enormous debt burdens that restricted long-term economic independence. Critics argue that foreign-funded development often came with conditions that weakened national control over policy decisions. This is where Ibrahim Traoré's vision begins to separate itself from traditional models. According to supporters of the government, Burkina Faso is attempting to redesign urban development around sovereignty first. Instead of prioritizing foreign-funded megaprojects, the strategy focuses on local materials, local labor, state-controlled land management, and organized high-density urban planning. The philosophy behind the project is simple but extremely ambitious. If the state controls land, infrastructure planning, and labor mobilization, then it can theoretically build cities that serve national interests rather than private speculation or foreign investors. In many developing nations, land speculation has become a major problem. Wealthy elites and private developers buy large areas of land while ordinary citizens struggle to access affordable housing. Informal settlements grow because urban populations expand faster than organized development. Traoré's supporters argue that nationalizing land management could allow the government to break this cycle. Instead of allowing chaotic urban sprawl, the state could organize housing construction systematically, creating structured communities with transportation access, utilities, schools, markets, and public services integrated from the beginning. This is one reason the government often speaks about replacing precarious slums with organized urban ecosystems rather than simply building isolated housing blocks. The objective is not only shelter. The objective is social restructuring. In this vision, modern cities are not supposed to become playgrounds for foreign corporations or luxury real estate speculation. They are supposed to become engines of national productivity. Residential zones connect directly to local economic activity. Construction stimulates domestic industries. Labor opportunities remain inside the country instead of flowing outward through foreign contractors. The symbolism behind this approach is incredibly powerful for many Africans. For decades, development in Africa has often been associated with dependency. Western loans, foreign consultants, imported blueprints, external approval. But Traoré's rhetoric frames development differently. He presents it as an act of resistance. In speeches and public messaging, sovereignty is not treated as an abstract political concept. It becomes tied directly to roads, housing, architecture, and city planning. Every building project becomes part of a larger ideological statement. Burkina Faso must build for itself, finance itself, and design its own future. This message resonates strongly with younger African audiences frustrated by decades of poverty despite enormous natural resources across the continent. Many see Traoré as part of a broader movement rejecting the post-colonial economic order. However, the challenges facing this vision are enormous. Urban transformation requires massive coordination. Housing projects demand cement, steel, transportation networks, electricity systems, water infrastructure, engineering expertise, and long-term maintenance capacity. Even wealthy countries struggle with affordable housing crises. Burkina Faso also faces serious security challenges due to extremist violence in parts of the country. Economic pressure from regional instability further complicates development goals. Critics argue that transforming entire urban systems while simultaneously managing security threats may stretch state resources dangerously thin. But supporters respond with a different argument. They say dependency itself is the greatest long-term danger. According to this perspective, relying forever on international debt traps countries in permanent weakness. Even if sovereign development is slower and more difficult, they believe it creates stronger national foundations over time. One of the most fascinating aspects of Traoré's urban narrative is the rejection of what some African intellectuals call the colonial grid. This term refers not only to physical street layouts but also to inherited systems of social and economic organization. Colonial urban planning often separated populations by class and function. Administrative districts were prioritized over community development. Commercial extraction mattered more than public dignity. Even decades after independence, many cities still operate according to patterns established during foreign rule. Traoré's movement frames modern housing development as a process of psychological liberation as much as physical construction. Rebuilding cities becomes symbolic of rebuilding national identity itself. This is why discussions surrounding architecture have become unexpectedly political in Burkina Faso. Supporters argue that imported Western urban models do not always fit African social realities. Family structures, climate conditions, community interactions, and local economies often differ significantly from European planning assumptions. As a result, there is growing interest in designing urban environments rooted more directly in local conditions and African priorities. This includes discussions about climate-adapted materials, mixed-use neighborhoods, community-centered infrastructure, and locally sourced construction methods. Another important dimension of this housing revolution is labor. Many African countries import foreign construction companies for major infrastructure projects. While these projects may deliver visible results, critics argue they often fail to build long-term domestic industrial capacity because profits and technical expertise leave the country afterward. Traoré's supporters claim Burkina Faso wants a different path. By emphasizing local labor deployment, the government aims to create employment while simultaneously developing national construction capabilities. If successful, this could have powerful economic effects. Housing projects generate demand across multiple industries including manufacturing, transportation, engineering, energy, agriculture, and retail. Large-scale urban development can stimulate entire domestic economies when local participation remains high. This is especially important in countries with rapidly growing youth populations. Across Africa, millions of young people enter the workforce every year. Job creation has become one of the continent's biggest political and economic challenges. For many supporters, organized housing development represents more than urban modernization. It represents economic mobilization. But questions remain about financing. Perhaps the most controversial part of Traoré's narrative is the claim that modernization does not require surrendering to foreign debt structures. This directly challenges decades of conventional economic thinking. Traditionally, large-scale infrastructure projects in developing nations rely heavily on international financing institutions, bilateral loans, or foreign investment partnerships. These arrangements provide capital but often create long-term financial obligations. Traoré's model emphasizes internal mobilization instead. State coordination, resource nationalism, domestic economic circulation, public labor engagement, strategic prioritization. Supporters compare aspects of this strategy to historical periods where nations rapidly industrialized through strong internal organization rather than external dependency. They argue that disciplined national planning can achieve more than many experts assume. Skeptics remain unconvinced. They argue that modern urbanization requires enormous financial resources that poor countries simply cannot generate alone at sufficient speed. Without major foreign capital inflows, critics fear projects could stall or fail entirely. This debate touches on one of the deepest questions in global development today. Can poor nations truly achieve sovereign modernization in a global economy dominated by powerful financial systems? Burkina Faso may become one of the most important real-world tests of that question. International reactions to Traoré's leadership have been deeply divided. Across many parts of Africa, especially among younger audiences online, he has become a symbol of resistance against neo-colonial influence. Videos, speeches, and political commentary surrounding his leadership circulate widely across social media platforms. Many supporters see him as a leader attempting to restore national pride in a world where African governments are often viewed as dependent on external approval. His emphasis on sovereignty, resource control, and domestic development resonates emotionally with populations frustrated by inequality and foreign interference. At the same time, international critics express concern over political instability, governance risks, and military-led rule. Some analysts question whether revolutionary rhetoric can realistically translate into sustainable institutional progress. Yet regardless of political divisions, Traoré's messaging has undeniably shifted conversations about development across Africa. Instead of asking how to attract Western approval, discussions increasingly focus on how nations can maximize internal strength. Housing has become central to that conversation because cities shape everyday life more directly than almost any other political issue. The condition of roads, neighborhoods, electricity systems, water access, transportation, and housing affects millions of people every single day. A modern city symbolizes power. A collapsing city symbolizes weakness. This is why Traoré's housing revolution carries such emotional weight. It is not only about infrastructure. It is about dignity. Imagine a generation growing up in organized communities rather than neglected slums. Imagine urban environments where local industries thrive alongside residential development. Imagine cities designed around public functionality instead of colonial extraction patterns. These are the images driving support behind the movement. However, the risks of failure are equally enormous. If expectations rise too quickly without visible long-term results, public frustration could intensify. Large-scale urban transformation requires patience, technical expertise, institutional stability, and economic resilience. Even under ideal conditions, such transitions take years. There is also the challenge of balancing ideology with practicality. Revolutionary narratives inspire populations, but concrete implementation determines success. Roads must function. Utilities must operate reliably. Housing must remain affordable. Infrastructure must survive long-term use. History is filled with ambitious national modernization projects that began with extraordinary optimism but later struggled under economic pressure or administrative limitations. Burkina Faso now stands at a critical crossroads where symbolism and reality must increasingly converge. One of the most interesting aspects of the current moment is how urban planning itself has entered geopolitical discussions. For decades, conversations about sovereignty focused mainly on military power, natural resources, or political independence. But Traoré's movement expands sovereignty into architecture and city design. Who owns the land? Who finances the buildings? Who controls the labor? Who designs the neighborhoods? Who profits from urban expansion? These questions transform construction into politics. And perhaps this is why the world is paying such close attention. Burkina Faso is not simply proposing new apartments or roads. It is proposing an alternative development philosophy. The message is clear. A nation should not have to sacrifice autonomy in order to modernize. Whether this vision ultimately succeeds or struggles, it is already influencing conversations far beyond Burkina Faso's borders. Across Africa, many people are asking difficult questions about the legacy of colonial urban systems, foreign debt dependency, and the future of African cities. Can African nations design development models rooted primarily in their own priorities? Can sovereignty become economically sustainable in a highly interconnected global system? And can cities built around dignity and national ownership outperform systems designed around external dependency? These are no longer theoretical debates. Burkina Faso is attempting to answer them in real time. What makes this story even more compelling is that it challenges assumptions held not only about Africa, but about development itself. For generations, modernization has often been presented as something granted by powerful financial institutions, multinational corporations, or geopolitical alliances. Traoré's narrative rejects that logic completely. Instead, it suggests that organized national will may matter more than foreign approval. That idea is incredibly controversial. But it is also incredibly powerful. And perhaps that is why millions of people across the world continue watching Burkina Faso with fascination. Because beneath the politics, beyond the headlines, there is a deeper human question unfolding. What happens when a nation decides it wants to define modernity on its own terms? As Burkina Faso pushes forward with its housing revolution, the stakes continue growing larger. Success could inspire similar sovereignty-driven urban movements across Africa and beyond. Failure could reinforce arguments that developing nations cannot escape external dependency. Either way, history is being written right now. And maybe the most important lesson from this entire story is that cities are never just collections of buildings. They are reflections of power, identity, values, and ambition. The shape of a city reveals the shape of a nation's future. Burkina Faso is now trying to redesign both at the same time. But now I want to ask you something. Do you believe African nations can truly modernize without relying on Western loans and international financial systems? Or do you think large-scale sovereign development projects like this are too risky in today's global economy? And if Burkina Faso succeeds in transforming slums into organized modern cities through national planning and local labor, could this become the beginning of a completely new African development model? I want you to share your thoughts in the comments because this conversation is much bigger than one country. The future of sovereignty, urban development, and economic independence may depend on questions exactly like these. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe to AfriPol Lens for more deep geopolitical analysis, African development stories, and global power shifts that mainstream media rarely explains in detail. Like this video if you found it informative, and share it with someone interested in Africa's future, global politics, or economic transformation. And most importantly, stay curious, because the world is changing faster than many people realize, and some of the most important revolutions are happening in places the world once ignored.